Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are listening to this. I'm Nick Goss. I'm going to be the host for the IT Budget Mastery Masterclass that we're going to go through over 5 days, today being the first day. Now, just let me stream this to Facebook. Bear with me one moment. And there we go. Right then, what are we going to talk about? Well, I'm guessing that what you're here for is to understand how you can pivot your career from being known as a techie to being more of a business leader. And that's something I've done myself some years ago now. So hopefully I can be your guide along the way. Before we kick off, though, I hope you can see me okay. And you can see my exercise equipment over the back of my shoulder. I honestly don't think I've put as much thought into what I was going to wear since I was 17 and going on my first date with the girl that was to become my fiance. So hopefully you can see me okay. I've got a good contrast with the background. One of the things that I think we all know in IT is that change is a given. And for some of us, that's actually why we got into it. It was new, it was happening. Nerds weren't seen as a bad thing anymore. And we got to do something that we enjoyed and learned a lot about, and indeed mastered from a technical perspective. I can remember when I was first faced with a major operating system upgrade, a version upgrade, not a release upgrade. And I was, along with other people, obviously put on training courses for about 3 months to really understand what was new, what had been upgraded, things we needed to be careful about, some of the changes to security and the way security was set up. And it was a long 3 months. I was running a technical team in the north of England. I'd still got my day job, as it were. I had to find time to learn this stuff, and it was hard, and it did take 3 months. And that's not a great way of spending 3 months, but we learned it and we got through it. We upgraded all the customers, and that was pretty much that. Until I realized that I'd have to do the same again in probably 2 years, and the same again in 2 years after that, and probably the same again in 2 years after that. And I looked at all of that, and while I did want to be the person that knew everything technically about the systems we were putting in, it was clear to me that that was going to be a challenge. And so I made a very deliberate decision to switch from just being a techie, if you like. I know that's not how we think of it, but it's certainly how the salespeople thought of it. And I moved into initially technical support for sales and demos and all those sort of things. And they ended up making the complete pivot to being a business manager and indeed a co-owner of a medium-sized outsourcing company. And I had other people that were the technical professionals, if you like, that knew the latest line of code and the latest security settings. And that was a difficult psychological time for me, because a lot of my self-worth had been tied up in knowing everything there was to know about a particular set of technology. And so it was quite strange when I had people working for me that knew more about the technology than I did. In fact, it was very strange. And that's what I'm here to help you with this week, is to help you see that change, see why it's important for your long-term career security, and that it's actually a good thing for you to do. Now, I'm not going to bore you with 60 PowerPoint slides, but I am just going to use them as a small guide, just 3 or 4 slides at the beginning of this. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Bear with me. So, hi again, back to the IT Budget Mastery course. And this is the core of what I want to really talk about today. I'm not going to go into details about budgets and how you should format them and some of the stuff we'll be doing later in the week, because first of all, I want you to understand the real issue here. And the problem that a lot of people have with IT people is that they look too much like the people on the left and not enough like the people on the right. We've all heard the joke that, you know, the first thing we say when we answer the phone is, have you turned it off and turned it on again? And those of you in the UK will probably have seen at least clips from a show called about IT people. And while it is a comedy, it's not too much of a comedy. And indeed, I've been in those rooms at times and it looked a bit too much like a documentary. The problem that the people on the right have with the people on the left is that we talk different languages. IT people talk in what the rest of the world thinks is gibberish. In fact, I was in a pub once some time ago with my technical team, and it was in the days of pub lunches, very, very long time ago. And we were having our pub lunch, pint of beer, ploughman sandwich, and we were sitting around talking about the kind of morning we'd had, and you know, what challenges we'd had, what we'd done, what projects we were working on. And after we'd been doing this for maybe half an hour, a guy on the next table that was nothing to do with us just leaned across and said, "What is it you guys are talking about?" Because we were literally talking a language he didn't understand. There were, you know, he didn't understand the nouns, he didn't understand the verbs, the grammatical syntax was about right, but he didn't get it in terms of what we're actually discussing. And it literally is a different language if you think about how we talk about things versus how businesses talk about things. And that's a problem for IT managers. And the reason it is a problem for IT managers is because they being the business, don't see IT managers as a strategic asset to the business. We are a cost center, whether we are delivering support to tens or hundreds or thousands of people as part of an internal IT department, or whether we are running a software as a service offering and delivering services to tens, hundreds of thousands, millions. In my case, I've run very big global systems. And the problem with all of these systems, whether it's 10 people or 10 million, is that when something goes wrong, people notice. And there are questions asked. And the IT manager is often hauled up before the CEO or indeed the board if it's a really problematic failure, and asked to explain themselves, which, broadly speaking, we do okay at. And we then need more budget to make things more secure or more stable or faster responding. And when we come to submit our budgets for the year, we tend to do it in the same way. we tend to use IT terminology for security or for stability or for productivity, meaning speed of response. And when we submit those budgets in an annual budget cycle, we're submitting something that really nobody understands apart from us. Because down the left-hand side of the budget are IT sort of things like firewalls, like security, like software licenses, like software maintenance maybe. And they're all English words, and you'd expect businesses to understand them. And they understand what each word means, but they have little idea of why they should care about it, why it matters, why it's such a big number. They understand the staff number is a big number, but why do we need so many staff? And why can't the systems just run themselves? You know, my laptop pretty much runs itself. So why do I need all these people just to run a bigger version of a laptop? And if we start articulating ourselves in IT speak, we are losing credibility. And that's what we're going to go through this week, is how to regain that credibility, become seen as a strategic business asset, and lose the tag of the techie sitting in the bottom cave of the office block, asking people to turn it off and turn it on again. I hope that's set the scene for today. By the end of today, what we're going to have done is, first of all, you will have had a permanent change in the way that you view what it is that IT departments do, and more importantly, the way you talk about what IT departments do. I'm going to touch on the main theme for this week, which is using your IT budget not just as a financial budgeting tool that you try and stay within the guidelines of or the parameters of, but actually as a tool for communication, and a regular tool for communication, not just a once a year thing, but something that you are picking up certainly every month, if not every week. And you'll have begun to see how you can boost the business impact that you have on people by using the words that they use rather than the words that we use. And as anyone that's worked for me knows, I have this rule. I have two rules, basically. The first is change your vocabulary dependent on who you're talking to. And we have inside the department language that we use inside the department, because we kind of understand what those words mean. And we have outside of the department language that talks the language that the people we're trying to communicate talk to. And my a great friend and mentor of mine, Paddy Azzarello, once said that if you need to explain your language to someone to show how relevant you are to them, then you've just shown how irrelevant you are to them. And that's something I took on board a long time ago. So we have inside the department and we have outside the department vocabulary. And the second one that I use, which has got nothing to do with this week, but I think it amuses me, but I'm very serious about it, is that we remove the word should from our vocabulary, or at least are very, very careful when we do use the word should. It always reminds me of a plumber walking out of a house that's had a leak, and the plumber's been called to fix the leak, and they've identified where the problem was, and that it was a valve that had blown, and they've had to go and get the valve out of the van, and all the time the water level is rising and rising and rising and rising, and they fiddle away with wrenches, and they do all sorts of things which, from an IT perspective, I think of as very complicated and technical, but which are probably fairly standard for a plumber. And they tell you how much it's going to be, and they walk out the door saying, that should work now. And that worries me, because I've just had 3 inches of water on the floor everywhere because something leaked. And the plumber is leaving saying it should be okay now. No. Spend an extra 5 minutes and check. And then you can leave saying, that's working now, that's okay now. Or you can stay longer and fix it properly. And I do have the same approach to IT systems, that don't say should. Test it first, and that way either it is working or it's not working. And if it's not working, we can do it again. So by the end of the day, a permanent change in the way you view IT within a business and in the vocabulary you use about it, how you can use that vocabulary, particularly with regard to the budget, as a communication tool, and how in doing so you can boost your business impact. Indeed, you can increase this strange thing that people talk about called executive presence. So you move from being seen as a techie to being seen as a business executive. So we're going to talk about 3 things. The big thing today that we're going to talk about is language. So I know the master classes is trailed as an IT budget mastery, but you're not going to master the creation of a budget, of an IT budget, without looking very, very carefully at the language that you use in that budget. And that is what we're going to be doing during the rest of the week, is making a 90-degree shift in the way that you articulate what you're spending the money on. But first of all, we need to really set the foundations for that. So we'll talk about language today. We're also going to look into value, and particularly when you link the two together, how the language you use can demonstrate the value you are to the organization and not just be seen as a large cost center. And we're also going to talk a little bit about executive presence and what that is, and how understanding both language and value can really help you with regard to increasing your executive presence. And that is all I'm going to share for the moment. That nearly went. And so I'll just stop sharing, and now you can see me again. So the first one of those, language. Why doesn't everybody understand technical terms? Think about when you were a junior. When I was a junior, many years ago, I'd actually had a career before IT, before high tech. I'd worked in the music industry. I was a sound engineer. And in music, because it's about hearing, you can hear anything that's delayed by more than about 50 milliseconds. You can start hearing the sound going wobbly. And you've all heard the sound. It's that one in prog rock bands that goes, it's that phasing, as we would call it. And so 50 milliseconds or less is really the limit when it comes to working on sound, whether it's working in studios, working live, both of which I did. But you kind of get used to measuring things in milliseconds. And indeed, I've done cable trails trying to find where something was wrong, because there was a longer than 50 millisecond delay in it, and it was messing up the sound. So when you talk about response time in the music industry, this was, we all had computers on our desktops. They tend to be Apples. you talk about response time, and there's a delay, and those are understandable words, hopefully. And so when I moved into IT, I had to go on a training course. Obviously, I'd done bits of computers and maths at university, but I had to go on a business computing course, and it was quite an eye opener for me, because I literally, on the first exercise, you had to type something in, press enter, and you're expecting something to happen on the screen. And so I typed my stuff in and pressed enter. Nothing happened. So I turned around to this guy and said, "Nothing's happening." And I looked back and it had changed. I went, "Oh, that was a bit slow." So I did something else and hit enter and went, "Yeah, it's not working again." And then came back and went, "Oh, it's done it again." And so I typed the other thing in, I pressed enter, and I watched the screen. And about 2 seconds after I pressed enter, the screen changed. And I had this, I'd love to say it was an epiphany. It really wasn't. It was this worry that, oh my God, this is going to be my life. I'm going to be waiting around for screens to change for the rest of my life. And it was just because although the language was the same, response time, the reality was different. In the music industry, 50 milliseconds was a catastrophe. In business computing, 2 seconds screen to screen was seen as, well, that's okay. That's not a problem. And now we're all in IT. We've probably forgotten when we learned a lot of the terms that we use. When did you learn the paging, or when did you learn moth or something like that? It was decades ago. But it was so long ago, and it's so deep inside you that you think everybody understands these terms, and intellectually that they don't. But we all do it. We all just use these phrases as part of natural conversation that we've learned years and years ago. And we don't understand why people don't get it. And most of the reason why they don't know is because they're not working in IT. They're working in finance. They're working in customer support. They're working as customer success managers. They're salespeople. You name it. They've all got their own jargon, and so have we. The problem is that because we've got our own jargon and they've got their own jargon, we are literally talking different languages. I lived in the States for 10 years, and I was in Silicon Valley for 10 years, and Silicon Valley is a very strange place anyway. But really, it was the fact that it was in America that's strange, because we were all immigrants to Silicon Valley. I don't think there is anybody born in Silicon Valley. We all come there from somewhere else. But there is a language that America in general uses, which I wasn't familiar with. And, I speak English, I think, and Americans certainly think they speak English. And yet there were all sorts of things that just made no sense to me. My wife's American, was American, where it was now. But we remember there was one time when we were planning a trip at the weekend to this very pretty place just south of Silicon Valley. And I happened to see a newspaper and got completely the wrong end of the stick. And so when my wife came home and said, I think the trip at the weekend is off. And she goes, "Oh, why?" And I said, "Well, apparently the place has been invaded by shutterbugs." Now, to me, not knowing the word shutterbug, I assumed it was some sort of bug, like 6 legs bug. It isn't that. It's someone that likes cameras. And they were all going there for the same reason that we were there, or wanting to go there, which was there was lots of butterflies. It's this place called Pacific Grove, just south of Silicon Valley. And lots of butterflies go there every year, and That's why we wanted to go, because we wanted to see all the millions of butterflies there. And so all these shutterbugs wanted to go for exactly the same reason. But it was a different noun. I'd never heard it before. And the reason I mention that is it's just so difficult trying to interpolate what somebody means if you just fundamentally don't know the word, or you don't know their situation. There was another time, again in California, when I was putting in irrigation, piping just to keep the flowers that we spent a ridiculous amount of money on, to keep them actually, alive. And my wife was sitting on a sun lounge as I was fighting with all this plastic tubing, and very humorously but unhelpfully said, "You're not very good at that, are you?" And I sort of looked at her and I went, "What do you mean?" And she says, "Well, you're not very good at that, are you?" And I said, "No, but it's the first time I've done it." And she sort of looked at me strange and said, "Well, you've never put in irrigation before?" I said, "No." And she goes, "Don't you have irrigation in the UK?" And I said, "No, we have this thing called rain. It does the irrigation for us. But it's a similar kind of problem. You either don't understand the word or you don't understand the context that people are talking from. And this is a real problem if you're in IT, because we do have this internal context that we all understand, and we have our own jargon that we all understand. And that's fine within the department, but outside of the department, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. And if you've ever been in an IT budget meeting, and certainly the first one I was ever in, it's it's a room full of execs that are looking at a PowerPoint presentation or an Excel sheet for a week or more, going through with the CFO and the CEO what everyone's spending their money on, what the budget is going to be, and it's being challenged, quite rightly, particularly by the CFO, but also by everyone else in the room. Everyone's poking holes in everyone else's budget, because money is tight. You want to make sure that your department gets at least a fair crack of the whip, if not a better than fair crack of the whip. And so what happens is people will poke and prod at what's being displayed. And it goes through every department. And the first one I was in, IT, was towards the end. And I put up my budget, which was the same as the person before had used. And we obviously updated the numbers, and all the people in the room looked at it, and this was a really tight, we knew it was going to be a very tight year, much like now, actually. All budgets are under severe pressure. And there were all these technical terms on the left-hand side, and there was a very big number on the bottom right-hand corner. In fact, it was a bigger number than the profit the company was going to make that year. It was a non-trivial number. And so people, if you like, fought amongst themselves to mess me up. And the one thing that they did understand, that was on my sheet, was staff costs. And so I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, "Why is that staff number so high?" And I said, "Well, because we need that number of staff to keep the service running 24 hours a day." And then I do remember who it was. Obviously, I won't name him, but this guy said, "Surely computers kind of run themselves nowadays, don't they?" My laptop does. And with the implicit criticism that I was sandbagging the staff number. And I said, "Yeah, but we need all those different skill sets to keep everything running." And then it started. Then it all kicked off. Everybody was jumping all over me. of why is this so big? Why is that so big? Why do you need 2 of those instead of 1 of those? Why do you need 3 of those people rather than 1 of those people? And from an IT perspective, it might be fairly obvious, that you need 3 people on critical technologies as an absolute minimum. You might need 30, but you certainly need 3 if you're running a 24-hour operation and you want people to be able to have holidays, take time off for training, be ill. You want at least coverage that everything's going to be okay on any particular given day. And I came out of it with a 18%, I think it was, budget cut. And I was furious, to be honest. I was furious with them, but I was really furious with myself because I hadn't been able to articulate the value that we were delivering to the organization. And I also had to go back to my department and say, look, we just can't afford to do this. And, the level we were hoping to, we're going to have to sort of refactor it. And that was very difficult, but it was also a real aha for me, because it meant that I was not communicating value. I was talking about costs and things that drove costs, like staff, software costs, maintenance costs, all the rest of it. But I wasn't communicating the value that I was delivering to the business. And if you look at it from a value perspective, it's much easier for other people to understand you. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. If you start with the value to other people, that's the way you get them to understand you. And also, that's the way you get them on side, rather than everyone taking pot shots at you. Because if you think about it, every department's got their favorite projects that they need delivering this year, or they've got these critical workflows that they need to make sure are delivered up to a certain standard. And finding that balance point in the quality of service, it's the three-way balance. You have the quality of service, you have the cost of delivery of that service, and if you're in the software as a service business, you have customer churn. And finding a balance point between those 3 is absolutely critical to the success of the organization. And even if you're not in the software as a service business, if you're in the, if you're running an IT department where you have end users, certainly you have the first 2. You have the cost and the workflows that you deliver. And you've also got, if you like, sniping from the rest of the organization if they're not happy with the quality of the service that you're providing. And so you move from what words you use into what value do you deliver. And you deliver value in words that other departments already understand. Back to the advice that I was given by the business mentor, Patty Azzarello. If you need to teach someone your language so that they understand how relevant you are to them, then you've just taught them how irrelevant you are to them. And so language and the words that you use cannot be technical words, because no one cares about the technology. If we were using magic pixie dust, they wouldn't care. As long as it worked and it was available at the right price, magic pixie dust would be fine. Nobody wants to know what we're doing. No one, let's face it, life is too short to continually learn the new technology. And certainly those of us that have been in the industry for, more than 5 years, really, have seen technology shifts. And not only is it difficult if you're a technologist to make this shift into business language, it's also career limiting. If you are very good at one technology, and then the technology shifts. And I think most people recognize that we're in the middle of two things at the moment. One, we're in the middle of a technology shift with machine learning. I'm not going to, use the phrase AI because it's been much overused. I'm thinking that we're probably going to be getting AI with our cornflakes pretty soon. But certainly, machine learning and large language models are having an impact in what people expect of technology. And we're also, it would seem, heading into, if not technically a recession, certainly a very difficult time with regard to budgets and validating budgets and having budgets challenged. And so we need to shift our language so that we are really focusing on what value do we deliver to the business. I remember again, some years ago, I went into a business meeting, having learned this I thought pretty well, that you speak in the language of the business and blah, blah, blah. And someone said, could you just drill down into that number for this department? So happily, I opened up the particular sheet, said yes, and so this is the way we've got it. And we're still talking mostly business terms, except when there wasn't a business term available. And one of the phrases was software maintenance. And so the CEO said, why are we paying that figure for software maintenance? I said, well, it's software maintenance. You don't get an option of not paying it. And he asked the perfectly reasonable question, what would happen if we didn't pay it? Well, it's a tricky one to answer, isn't it? Because you kind of know what the problem might be, but there's no guarantee that problem would actually occur. So it's a risk issue. And this is where you can really use business language, but in IT budget terms. Because as an IT organization, you take on a lot of risk on behalf of the business. So trade secrets leaking out, all the PCs being locked out because you're being held hostage to some nefarious people that have introduced some malware into your service. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different things that IT departments, different risks that IT departments solve quietly for the business. But in solving them quietly, they actually don't involve the business in the decision. And there are many things that we do which we solve very neatly and very quietly, but that do cost money. And we're not involving the business in the decision as to what level of risk are we prepared to accept with regard to this. And so you've got the language component, you've got the value component, but the third component is risk. And in my at one point, I was running like a service of 50 million end users, and I also ran risk because it was so tightly linked that it was the sensible place to have the department, to have the ownership of risk was in my department, rather than the financial organization, which is, I think, probably more common. And certainly I worked very closely with the CFO with regard to the risk to the business, and particularly the existential risk to the business. What was going to happen that was going to blow the business up totally? What could happen, and how much were we prepared to spend based on the likelihood of that risk actually turning out to be real? And so we've got really three things now. We've got the language that we use, we've got the value that we deliver. And so what happens with this other thing I promised with regard to executive presence? And the best way I've got of explaining this is think about it from the other executive's perspective. Who do they want? Not running their IT, but who do they want in the 3 monthly business meetings? Who do they want around the table? Not just in the meeting, but when they go to dinner afterwards. Who do they want? They want someone that they speak the same language as. They want someone that they know is a specialist in their own area, as all of them are specialists in their area, but that also they can have a common communication with. They can speak a similar language. They know, I mean, and it is fit in. And we all know the IT equivalent of that. But to be an executive, you've got to walk like a duck, talk like a duck, and be an executive. And again, if you think about it from execs that you know, they talk about the business in a certain language. They talk about value. They talk about risk. Yes, they talk about costs, but rarely do they do it in so much jargon that it's impenetrable to anybody else. Maybe we all learn a little bit of sales speak. Maybe we earn a little bit of marketing. But basically, they talk at a, it's unfair to say they talk at a grade 8 reading level. But that's the way most people communicate. That's actually the easiest way to understand something, is if you pitch it so that a 12, 13-year-old can understand it. Because it shouldn't be too hard. We're all busy. Being busy creates a mental effect. It creates a cognitive drain. If you listen to the cognitive scientists, it is harder for us to read long sentences with multiple clauses, with long words in. I mean, I know, but seriously, long sentences, multiple clauses, long words all hinder communication. And so keeping it crisp and to the point, that's the way to do it. Right, let me share my screen again. Because you've got something coming. Homework for today, so that we can make a good start tomorrow on the actual IT budget and how we're going to work it over, turn it around. Doesn't have to be complete, but this is what you're going to do. Quickly, and I do mean quickly, 15 minutes tops. Go around each department head, whether that's C-level or head of region or head of department. What are their key business objectives? What you're trying to do here is to capture the phrase that they use. You're literally creating a dictionary here of what are their key business objectives, even maybe what metrics are used for those business objectives. Secondly, same department, same people, what are their major projects that they're expecting IT to deliver? And maybe, if you have time, what other projects are there? Because there may be an IT component as part of them that they're not thinking of as an IT project. No, they're not putting in some big enterprise resource planning system. No, but they are changing the way the field engineers work, and the field engineers will be having ruggedized laptops, something like that, or tablets it would be nowadays. Still the same people. What risks do they see in their business? And this one really is to do with IT and security. So what risks do they see? And then finally, what are their key departmental workflows? So what do I mean by that? Well, think of it as if it's someone taking a sales order. What are all the steps that sales order goes through before the product gets delivered, before it gets billed, before that billing gets recognized. Okay, so there's 4 things. Quickly, I don't want to disrupt your day tomorrow, but 4 things. What are each department's key business objectives? What are their major projects? What risks are they, if you like, exposed to? And what are their key departmental workflows? And it doesn't have to be complete. This is an exercise, not a campaign. Right? I want to teach you how you go about doing this in more detail than you've got in the white paper, but you almost certainly will have 2 or 3 goes at this before you get a full IT budget factored this different way, because these are the hooks that we're going to hang the whole IT budget off. We're going to say this budget delivers these business objectives, these major projects, it addresses these risks, and it supports these particular departmental workflows. And yes, there'll be some money left over, and we'll smudge that over the top. But there'll be a lot less of that because it will be specific. And the fantastic thing that this does is it changes what happens in that dimly lit room when you're all looking at the budget. Because rather than they're looking at your budget, seeing lots of technical gibberish on the left-hand side, as far as they're concerned, and a big number in the bottom right-hand corner, suddenly everyone around the room will go, oh, that's mine, I want that. Oh, and someone else will say, oh, that's mine, that's really important. And so you turn them from, at best, disinterested viewers, and at worst, actual antagonists, to people that are on your side, and you've built allies. And because you're talking about business, then you're talking their language. And their language is about the value that each one of them delivers to the organization. And that's what starts to build your executive presence. They start seeing you as a business leader with a specialty in IT, rather than a techie with a specialist in saying, turn it off and turn it on again. I'm hoping that makes sense. And that's all I've got in terms of sharing today. I hope that's, first of all, interested you. And as someone that I used to work with, I hope it's also been useful and entertaining. 50 minutes made you think and changed your perception of what an IT budget is, what your internal voice is versus internal in the department voice is versus outside of the department, and why it is important for you to talk this common language of business rather than IT techie speak if you want to make this transition from being top techie to being a strategic business leader, because that is what delivers career security over the long term for those of us that come from a technical background, because the technical background keeps changing and we don't want it to change to such an extent that we are seen as long in the tooth, out of date, not needed anymore. We want to be the strategic business leader. Good luck with the homework. Don't overdo it. Seriously, ask your colleagues for 15 minutes of their time and stick to it, because they don't want to be explaining everything to you in huge amounts of detail either. They're busy, you're busy, we're all busy. So let's just get, enough is enough information. And I'll talk to you same place, same time tomorrow. Hope you've enjoyed it. Bye for now.